Welcome back to WION World is One. You're watching Speed News with me, Vidur Kathuria. Let's get started. US-based rights groups say the death toll of Iran's protests has surpassed the 2,400 mark. US President Donald Trump said he was seeking accurate numbers on what he called significant killings in Iran and would act accordingly, but declined to say what form any US response could take. US and Iran might be on the verge of a wider conflict, as Trump said he had cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials. The Iranian military has vowed stronger response against any new act of aggression. Meanwhile, an ongoing internet blackout is heightening tensions in Iran, where a lack of access to reliable information is adding to the turmoil sparked by weeks of widespread protests. Protests have erupted in several Iranian cities since late December over the sharp fall in the national currency, the rial, and long-standing economic hardships. Elon Musk's Starlink is reportedly offering free internet in Iran amid a near-total internet blackout and nationwide mass protests. Digital rights groups say Starlink users in Iran were able to get online for free. However, Starlink has not officially confirmed the move. The communication lifeline Starlink has provided for some protesters in Iran marks the latest sign of influence Musk and his satellite internet service have in global conflicts and unrest around the world. However, experts say next-generation communication satellites that could transmit directly from space to cell phone are not yet deployable. Hours after US President Donald Trump urged Iranians to take over government institutions, Iran's national security chief Ali Larijani has called Trump and Netanyahu main killers of Iranian people. Larijani accused Washington and Tel Aviv of fueling unrest that has claimed thousands of lives as Iranian authorities intensify their crackdown on demonstrators angered by economic collapse and political repression. This comes after the US president cancelled talks with Iranian officials amid unrest that has killed over 2,400 people. Greenland and Denmark presented a united front before a high-stakes talk with top US authorities. Standing with his Danish counterpart, Greenland's Prime Minister said his country chose Denmark and it will not be owned by the United States. Danish PM Mette Frederiksen echoed the same sentiment, adding that Greenland is not for sale. Talking about the upcoming meeting with the US, she added that they will discuss increased security measures on the Arctic island. Greenlanders said they hoped for a diplomatic solution ahead of a meeting in Washington between the Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers and US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The meeting comes after US President Donald Trump recently stepped up threats to take over Greenland, an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. The United States has designated Muslim Brotherhood branches in Egypt, Lebanon and Jordan as terrorist organizations, citing their history of violence and in part what it called their support for Hamas. The move, formally set in motion last November, will introduce sanctions against one of the Arab world's oldest and most influential Islamist movements. Republicans and right-wing voices have long advocated for and considered terrorist designations for the Muslim Brotherhood. Tightening its grip over Venezuelan oil exports, the Trump administration has filed for court warrants to seize dozens of tankers linked to the Venezuelan oil trade. Multiple suits have been reportedly filed in district courts, primarily in Washington, D.C. However, the number of seizure warrants filed and received remains unclear. In recent weeks, the US has seized 5 vessels. More action could reportedly unfold soon. Another report by news agency Reuters suggests that Venezuela has begun reopening some of the oil wells shut under US embargo. Accounts on the number of prisoners released in Venezuela continue to vary. Venezuela's top lawmaker, Jorge Rodriguez, said that over 400 people had been freed from prison as part of a process announced last week, intended as a gesture of peace. However, rights groups have said that the number of releases ranges between 60 and 70, while complaining about the slow pace and lack of information. Venezuela's penitentiary authority said that a total of 116 people had been freed from prison so far. A leading local NGO that works on legal support for detainees said at least 800 political prisoners were behind bars at the beginning of the year. Venezuelan authorities said they seized 6.85 tons of drugs in the southern state of Bolivar. Cabello said the seizure involved 238 packages containing 14,280 individual wrappings for a total weight of 6,850 kilograms. The operation also led to the seizure of 2 boats, including one that had capsized, and described the raid as part of Operation Soledad, carried out on January 5th in Bolivar. Cabello said as of yesterday, authorities had seized a total of 7,148 kilograms of drugs nationwide so far in 2026. He also rejected allegations of official involvement in drug trafficking. Former US President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have refused to comply with a congressional subpoena in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The Clintons have called the subpoena issued by a Republican-controlled House committee legally invalid as lawmakers move forward contempt of Congress proceedings. In a letter released on social media, the Clintons warned House Oversight Chair Republican James Comer that the process is literally designed to result in their imprisonment. Comer says contempt proceedings could begin as early as next week, setting the stage for a rare, complex and politically charged confrontation. US President Donald Trump announced at a rally that naturalized immigrants who are convicted of fraud in the country may lose their citizenships. In his speech, Trump said the decision will affect any naturalized immigrant, but specially mentioned Somalia. The Somali community in the US has become a frequent target of the Trump administration of late. It also is running a crackdown in Minnesota targeting what it claims is a large-scale public benefit fraud by the state's Somali community. The administration has also ended temporary deportation protections and work permits for some Somali nationals. Temporary protected status shields migrants from deportation to countries deemed unsafe to return and grants them temporary work authorization. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has joined protesting nurses in New York and urged a return to negotiations. Nurses with the New York State Nurses Association have been picketing outside a hospital, demanding safer staffing levels, improved working conditions and a fair contract. Mamdani has called on the hospital management and the nurses union to bargain in good faith and reach an agreement that allows nurses who work in this city to live in this city. This is reportedly the largest nurses' strike in the history of New York City, with nearly 15,000 nurses walking off the job across multiple hospitals. A total of 116 minority deaths were reported between June 6, 2025 and Jan 5, 2026 in Bangladesh. A report by the Human Rights Congress for Bangladesh Minorities states that these deaths were documented across all 8 divisions and 45 districts of the country. The act spanned lynching, murder and suspicious deaths, indicating a nationwide pattern of targeted atrocities. A Hamas delegation is in Cairo to hold discussions on the Gaza ceasefire. The delegation will hold talks with the Egyptian side on completing the implementation of the first phase of the ceasefire, including the opening of the Rafah crossing in both directions. The Hamas delegation is led by the group's chief negotiator in the Gaza truce talks, Khalil al-Hayya. A statement by Hamas side said that the discussion will also focus on accelerating transition to the second phase, including the formation of the administrative committee and complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces have issued a statement saying that during operations in the southern Gaza Strip, the IDF troops killed 3 terrorists who had crossed the yellow line of the military ceasefire. The statement added that forces would remain deployed in the area and would continue operations to eliminate threats. On the same day, the Palestinian Ministry of the Interior in Gaza Strip issued a statement saying that Mahmoud al-Astal, the head of the police investigation department in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, was shot and killed. Sources say al-Astal was a key member of Hamas. The Palestinian armed group in Gaza, backed by Israel, claimed responsibility for the shooting. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has departed for China to discuss trade and international security. This marks the first Canadian Prime Minister's visit to Beijing since 2017 amid strained relations with the US over trade and security issues. Meanwhile, Chinese state media has called on Canadian government to set a foreign policy path independent of the United States, what it calls strategic autonomy. Canada has long been one of America's closest allies, geographically and otherwise. However, Beijing hopes that Trump's economic aggression and now military action against other countries will erode that long-standing relationship. A South Korean court reportedly plans to deliver a verdict on February 19th in a case against former President Yoon Suk-yeol for his December 2024 declaration of martial law. South Korean prosecutors called for the death penalty to be handed down to Yoon Suk-yeol for his declaration of martial law, which plunged the country into chaos. Yoon triggered a political crisis when he announced an end to civilian rule in December 2024 and sent troops to parliament to enforce it. But his attempt failed and he became the country's first sitting president to be taken into custody when he was detained last January. Yoon's criminal trial for insurrection, abuse of power and other offences linked to the declaration drew to a close after 11 hours of proceedings. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis held talks with some farmers' representatives for the first time after weeks of protests over farm and delays and an EU-Mercosur trade deal. The Greek PM met a 21-member delegation of farmers who agreed to meet him in Athens. Many other farmers, however, declined to attend the talks. Mitsotakis' centre-right government, under fire over a farm aid corruption scandal, offered to farmers additional cuts in fuel tax, electricity costs and compensations to breeders. This is in a bid to diffuse tensions after farmers blocked major highways and border crossings for weeks, disrupting travel and hitting some businesses. Government officials have said talks aim to offer solutions to about 600,000 farmers, stock breeders, fishers and beekeepers. He added, however, that after 45 days of protests, blockades of roads and borders could not be tolerated. Scientists confirmed the planet experienced its third warmest year on record in 2025, underscoring an unmistakable trend towards a hotter climate driven by human activity. Data released by global researchers including the UK's Met Office, the University of East Anglia and the National Centre for Atmospheric Science revealed 2025 marked the third consecutive year where temperatures exceeded 1.4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The Budapest airport has now reopened after extreme winter weather brought operations to a halt. The harsh weather conditions grounded flights and caused major disruption to travelers. Issuing a statement, the airport said it was temporarily closed due to black ice and extreme icing. The closure caused a backlog of delayed flights and a small number of cancellations. For some travelers, the delays caused her to worry about connecting flights. Airports in Prague, Vienna and Bratislava were also affected by weather conditions. Vienna International Airport suspended all takeoffs and landings shortly when a fast-moving band of freezing rain coated runway, taxiways and service roads in a layer of black ice. Defrosting crews were deployed, but super cold drizzle refroze almost instantly, forcing a complete operational stand-down until midday. More than 120 flights were cancelled in the first 6 hours. Several long-haul services were halted to the United States and Asia. Many travelers found themselves stranded or rerouted through Munich, Frankfurt and Venice. A rampaging wild elephant has been blamed for killing at least 20 people and injuring 15 others in the forests of the Indian state of Jharkhand. Wildlife officers are hunting for the animal, reported to have gone on the rampage for 9 days beginning early January. The incident has created widespread panic in the rural West Singhbhum district. India celebrates Makar Sankranti, one of India's oldest solar and harvest festivals. It marks the day when the sun moves into the Capricorn and begins its journey northward. Large number of devotees have arrived at Sangam Ghat in Prayagraj on the occasion of Makar Sankranti and Ekadashi in 2026. Meanwhile, North India revelled in the spirit of Lohri, whereas Pongal was celebrated in the southern states of Tamil Nadu. Asian shares inched higher on Wednesday, led by Japanese stocks, as investors priced in the risk of a snap election in Japan that could unlock more fiscal stimulus. The Nikkei rose more than 1% to a record, while the yen slid to its weakest level since July 2024, reviving concerns over possible market intervention. Elsewhere, Asia markets were mixed. South Korea's Kospi hovered just above flat, while the Kosdaq slipped 0.14%. Australia's ASX 200 edged slightly lower. In China, Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained 0.35%. Benign US inflation data kept expectations for a steady Fed this month intact. Oil prices jumped more than $1 a barrel on Tuesday, with Brent and US crude climbing over 2%. As fears of potential disruptions to Iranian crude exports overshadowed expectations of added supply from Venezuela. Traders are pricing in a geopolitical risk premium due to escalating unrest in Iran and warnings from the US about the situation, lifting oil towards multi-week highs. The rally lifted Gulf stock markets, where energy-linked shares also gained on higher crude prices. Despite the latest surge, the market remains watchful of global supply dynamics, including Venezuela's resumed shipments and broader geopolitical tensions. Gold surged to a record high as softer than expected US inflation data reinforced expectations of Federal Reserve rate cuts later this year. Spot gold briefly climbed above $4,630 an ounce, supported by falling inflation pressures and strong safe haven demand. Core US inflation cooled in December, increasing bets on easier monetary policy. Lower rates typically boost non-yielding assets like gold. Geopolitical tensions, concerns over Fed independence, and renewed trade threats from President Trump added to market uncertainty. Silver also rallied sharply, touching an all-time high, while platinum was flat and palladium edged higher. The US dollar rebounded to a near one-month high after inflation data came in largely as expected. December consumer prices rose 0.3% as earlier government shutdown distortions faded. helping steady markets despite political pressure from President Trump to cut rates. Global central bankers and major Wall Street CEOs publicly backed Fed Chair Jerome Powell, underlining support for Fed independence. Currency moves were muted in Asia, with euro and yuan little changed, while Bitcoin jumped to a 2-month high, reflecting improving risk sentiment. The British government is resetting its approach to copyright reform linked to artificial intelligence after a strong backlash from the creative industries. Technology Secretary Liz Kendall told a parliamentary committee that earlier plans to loosen copyright rules in favour of AI developers were a mistake, and that the government will now take a more balanced approach that protects creators while supporting economic growth from the AI. The UK had initially proposed allowing AI companies to train their models on any material they could legally access unless creators chose to opt out. X faced a major outage on Tuesday, impacting thousands of users across the US, UK, Canada, and other parts of the world. The disruption left users unable to access the app or website, underlining ongoing technical challenges for the platform. According to outage tracker Down Detector, issues started around 9 a.m. Eastern Time, with reports peaking at over 28,300 in the US alone. The UK saw more than 8,000 reports, while Canada reported over 3,200 users facing problems at the height of the outage. Users reported widespread login failures, feed access problems, and server connection errors. About 59% of complaints were related to the mobile app, 25% affected the website, and 16% cited server issues. Many users described the platform as completely unresponsive for hours. Manchester City will take a huge advantage into the second leg of the EFL Cup semi-finals after securing a 2-0 win over holders Newcastle. New signing Antoine Semenyo opened the scoring for City early in the second half. Semenyo seemed to have scored a second shortly after the hour mark, only for it to be discontinued. Ryan Cherki then added the second deep into injury time to secure the win at St James's Park. Holders Newcastle will visit the Etihad for the second leg early next month. US snowboarder Chloe Kim has said she will be fit to compete at the Winter Olympics next month despite dislocating her shoulder last week. The 25-year-old had an MRI scan on Friday after injuring her shoulder while training in Switzerland. Kim is aiming to become the first woman to win 3 consecutive Olympic gold medals in the halfpipe. She made history at the 2018 Games in Pyeongchang by becoming the youngest woman to win Olympic gold at just 17. Kim then defended her title 4 years later, claiming a second straight gold at the Beijing Winter Games. The Winter Games will take place in Italy from February 6th. Scott Adams, the cartoonist who captured the soul-crushing absurdity of white-collar office life through his comic strip Dilbert, has died at the age of 68. His ex-wife, Shelley Miles, confirmed his passing. Adams had been battling aggressive prostate cancer. India's National Award-winning star, Rani Mukherjee, was spotted celebrating Makar Sankranti in Ahmedabad. The star was also promoting her upcoming film, Mardani 3. The movie marks the actor's return to the big screen after winning the National Award in 2025. It will also mark the actor's 30th year in the film industry.